Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, coming at you with another solo video today, and we are going to be breaking down a running back tier that I think is particularly interesting between Achane, Isiah Pacheco, and Jash Jacobs. So without further ado, let's get into it. So these three guys I think are uniquely positioned. Personally, for me, I know I have Jash Jacobs ranked a little bit higher than most people, so for some, this might be focused on Achane versus Isiah Pacheco, but I think Jash Jacobs belongs in this conversation. He's been getting a lot of hype in camp. He's been working on passing downs in practices. And so I think that there's a chance that he is just a three-down workhorse on a very good offense, on a very young offense, and could be seeing a lot of elevated playing time and production on what he did last year. A lot of people will call 2020 an outlier, but let's get into each one of these players individually. We're going to start with Achane. So he finished as RB24 last year, which is honestly incredible because he only played 9 full games. He had 103 carries for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns, 27 receptions, 197 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Those numbers are unbelievably good for only playing in 9 full games. He had 2 other games that he didn't really play much in. One of them he left early with an injury, tried to come back a little bit too early from that early season injury, and the first was his very first game where he barely got on the field. So I would say that, we saw a lot of this production come in that one massive game against the Broncos where him and Mostert just absolutely shredded them on the ground. And the Broncos at the beginning of the year last year, like through the first half, really was one of the worst run defenses we had ever seen in recent NFL history. Like I would say within the last 10 years, they did start to get it together towards the end of the year. It wasn't quite as bad. But this was in week 3. Like they were very much, not a good unit. And so, seeing that he put up 202 and then 30-2 through the air in that game obviously fuels a significant portion of these numbers. He didn't do quite as much at the end of the year. It was a lot of, is Achane going to get more touches? Is Achane going to get more touches? Is Achane going to get more touches? And that never really came. And unfortunately, I think that held back his injury risk, or the feeling of injury risk, I guess, with him in a big way for me. I know, like, if we would have seen him again with a couple consecutive games of 15 touches, I'd be like, oh man, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be in a huge role. So, you see the bullet point here, or the knock on him is the health concerns in Mostert. And so the health concerns is a big one for me. The fact that he never really recaptured a 15 touch per game role is something I'm a little concerned about. But on the flip side, it's hard to come up with a better player for upside. If you're looking for the highest possible upside that you can possibly put together on your fantasy team, Achane is your guy. He was over 7 yards per rush last year, which is something that you, in almost like very close to 8 yards per touch, like 7.7. It's very, very difficult to find anybody throughout the history of the NFL that has had that kind of number as a rookie. I've comped it to Jamal Charles in the past. That's kind of what it feels like. And, Charles ended up putting together quite a few healthy years. He was a stud for a long time. And if Achane is going to be anything like that, is going to work in the passing game, is going to get 15 touches, even if that comes with 12 carries and 3 catches, right? He's going to find his way into a lot of production. He's going to find his way into a lot of touchdowns because this is going to be a very productive offense. And I really think that he's going to justify his early ADP in the games he does play. Now, he's obviously not going to pay off if he gets hurt or misses any sort of significant time, which is why he's a very, very much a gamble in the 3rd round, maybe in the 4th round of your Superflex leagues. Moving on to Isiah Pacheco. This is somebody that early in the process I had ranked a lot lower than I do now. He finished his RB16 last season. He had 200 carries for 935 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had 44 receptions for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. A lot of those receptions also came at the end of the year when Jerick McKinnon was hurt. He had a 5 reception and a 7 reception game in 2 of his last 5 games of the year. And so, that's a big number in terms of receptions for a running back that's not really considered to be, heavily involved in the passing game. But, right, you have all of these camp hype stories. You have Andy Reid coming out and saying that he's developed as a pass blocker. His hands are much better. He can run all of the routes. They asked who's going to be that guy on third down, and Andy Reid said Pacheco can do it all. So I just don't have an excuse anymore really to hold him down other than maybe he's not the most special talent. I mean, that's kind of it, right? I mean, other than that, the role is there, the offense is there, and we've seen Andy Reid running backs explode onto the fantasy scene in ways that we haven't seen with other offenses. So I really think that there's a major opportunity here for Pacheco this season to take on a much more significant role in the passing game. And if he's going to get 60 receptions, it's going to be really hard for him to not finish as a top 10 running back, especially if he's able to play all 17 games. So you see, he did miss 3 games last year, so that's kind of why his overall numbers are pushed down a little bit. But I mean, still almost 1,300 total yards and 9 touchdowns last year. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to build on that this year. I'm getting more and more and more excited to draft Pacheco, and I've actually pushed him all the way up to running back 10. I've seen him even higher in some people's rankings, but I think in Superflex, he's somebody that you can get on Sleeper in the 4th, 5th round. Maybe all of these guys kind of are, right? But I think at this point, I'm pushing Pacheco to the highest rank of this group here, and somebody that I would be excited to get, and somebody that I'm starting to feel better about as an anchor running back even, and you can get him late, and I think it's somebody that you can kind of build upon with your running back group, which is something that I didn't feel that way before. I kind of felt like that tier ended with Derrick Henry, which is generally a late 3rd, early 4th in Superflex leagues, but now I feel that way about Pacheco, opening up even another avenue and another player that you can get a little bit later than Henry and still feel very good about where your running backs are at, even in a little bit later pick. And then the last pick and the last player here is Jash Jacobs. So he finishes running back 27 last season. Really not that great, right? He only played in 13 games. He was hurt the last 4 games of the season. But overall, 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, 300 yards receiving and 0 receiving touchdowns. A fun fact on Jacobs, too, he's never had a receiving touchdown in his whole career. That almost seems impossible because he has been involved in the passing game throughout his career, but I think that'll change this year. I think he's going to get at least one, and I expect him to play on all 3 downs. They drafted Marshawn Lloyd, but he has a little bit of a hamstring injury going on in camp right now. And A.J. Dillon, best shape of his life. Okay, we've heard that before. But I do think that Dillon is a known quantity at this point, right? He can be decent on the goal line, but Jacobs is also excellent on the goal line. So that's kind of an overlapping skill set that I'd be surprised if they take Jacobs off the field for Dillon in those situations. Maybe 4th and 1, middle of the field, Dillon's on the field already. He gets those opportunities. Dillon's a decent pass catcher too. So, I think maybe he just is a pretty solid handcuff to Jacobs, and could fill Jacobs' role. And then they'll bring Lloyd along health-wise, and they'll try and get him involved in the second half of the season. But overall, very good offense. I think he's going into a significantly better situation here. We've seen Aaron Jones be very successful in this offense with a more limited role than I expect Jacobs to get. So I think the upside is there in a way that I don't think a lot of people are talking about because Jacobs had 3.5 yards per carry last year. But it's like, okay, I get it. He had 3.5 yards per carry. He's playing on a terrible offense. Nobody faced heavier boxes than he did in the entire league. Even Henry on the Titans faced less men in the box on average than Jacobs did last year. And so I think that it's just not going to be the case this year, right? He's going to have much better running lanes. The offense is going to be spread out more, 3 wide receivers on the field a lot of the time in Green Bay. The passing offense is great. And if they do decide to stack the box, Love is just going to pick them apart deep, and they're going to have to make adjustments that are going to be advantageous for Jacobs. So to me, he's only 1 year removed from being RB3, where he had over 1,600 rushing yards. And so, I'm not saying he's going to do that again this year. I just am saying that we should not be ignoring what kind of upside Jacobs does have as a player and in this offense. So overall, these 3 guys, I think they're all excellent picks. I think Jacobs is going to be the one that you can get the latest. So in your Superflex leagues, if you're going, it's Superflex 10-team leagues, I should specify. If you're going into that 5th round, I think Jacobs is going to be kind of a hot commodity at the beginning of the 5th round. That's where I expect him to go. And the other two I think are going to go in the fourth round. So, the way I have these ranked personally is Isiah Pacheco, and I have him at RB10. Devon Achane, I have him at RB11. And Jash Jacobs, I have him at running back 12. Hopefully that clears up any questions you had about this group of running backs. And thank you so much for watching. Look forward to talking to you in the next one.